Hello, it's Govinda Singh, 1984, Gov Lover, 84 Aria Voice and ST Limited, and I just wanted to do a vlog regarding democracy in Britain and how Britain is an undemocratic nation and far from being democratic at all. Now, there are lots of people, when it comes to politics, they're disgruntled by politics. I'm sure you've heard people say they're all the same, all the politicians are the same, they can't be trusted, they say one thing and when they come into power they don't do what they pledged during their campaign or their manifesto to get them into power, so they don't trust them because they all do the same. But that may necessarily not be the fault of the party that you voted for. That could be, so to get things in perspective, I'll just dissect it. In Britain you have a parliament, and in the parliament there's houses. You have the House of Commons and the House of Lords. And so when a party has pledged something during their campaign to be elected, during their manifesto, and they get elected, they get the majority votes from the civilian population, and they come into power to become a ruling government, there's stages. And so then they introduce bills. Now the bills are where they hope or they intend to become law. And so when a bill is introduced into the House of Commons, there's stages. There's the first reading of the bill, there's the second reading, there's various stages, there's the report stages, committee stages. So basically what happens, say for example the government party that's in power wants to introduce a bill, and then they talk about it. Then they send it to the House of Lords, and then the Lords will look at it, and they send it back to the House of Commons for another read, and then it goes back to the House of Lords, and there's amendments. They start changing things, or start making things a bit more precise and specific, and it just goes back and forth from the House of Commons and the House of Lords. And then when a bill has been agreed by both House of Lords and House of Commons, it goes for the royal assent, where the sovereign, the head of state, the royal's head of state in this case, Her Majesty Elizabeth II, she will approve the bill, and then it becomes law of the land. Or when it goes through those stages, it also can be blocked and not be approved. So we have to look at the House of Lords and what sort of institution establishment is the House of Lords. So the House of Lords is a peerage system, and you have hereditary peers, those who have hereditary reasons why they're peers, and then you have life peers. And the way the peerage works is a prime minister, for example, can appoint or nominate or suggest or recommend a minister or politician for peerage. Or in regards to the hereditary peerage, you have the hereditary peerage. You cannot inherit the peerage, but you can transfer the title. So if you're barren, it can go into your children, but they don't inherit the peerage. The way the hereditary peerage works is that those who are hereditary peers, they have to vote and elect a hereditary peer, someone to sit in the seat as a hereditary peer. And life peerages are people that have been suggested, and who the Queen suggests or appoints as a peer. And then I think it's something to, this is just a summary, it's not exact. I could make a few errors in explaining this, but this is just to get it off my chest. Peerages are based on letter patents, where they are suggested, like a queen or a president can say, I'm thinking of this person so and so, and then they get a peerage that way. And also there's the Lord Spiritual, which is the Church of England. And the Church of England Lord Spirituals, they're the archbishops of the Church of England who have not been elected, they've been appointed, and they have been they have a peerage, they have a seat in the House of Lords. And then there used to be a Church of Scotland, but because it became a Presbyterian, I think that's how you pronounce it, it no longer has a seat in the House of Lords. But so what I'm basically trying to say is, this system called the House of Lords is an undemocratic system. People who have various powerful positions in the House of Lords to either approve bills or block bills, that people want, that people voted for, have not been elected by the people of the land. They've been appointed by the aristocracy. So but there are just another thing. In the House of Lords, there's also the Lords Temporal. The Lords Temporal are the secular church, the archbishops who are secular. I think there was a rabbi who had a seat in the House of Lords as the Lord Temporal. And so the Lords Temporal is something that I'm thinking about and I focus on and been contemplating and pondering. Because it's secular, I think this is where you could say the House of Charles Darwin, Alfred Russel Wallace, the naturalist biologist, the natural selection scientist who belong to the House of Scientific Evolution, that believes we evolved from various primates throughout the world, and then after we evolved from organisms that evolved into primates and then evolved into various species of different human beings, languages formed, text and writing systems developed as time went by, and they realized a higher truth, a higher energy within us that they called God or Goddess, and then they wrote down and scribed down scriptures of how they believed we were created. And when we look at the parables, the fictitious parables of how they claim we were created, it's clearly not true and it's very much fiction. But we don't take literally the scriptures, but we metaphorically decipher and hold on to the mythological, the positive message that you can find in all religions. So in regards to the Lords Templar, I think this is where you can have Buddhist representation, neo-pagan representation such as the House of the Odinists, or the Valkyries, Freyas of the ancient Norse mythology, or the House of the Celtic mythology, the Tuatha De Danann, the neo-pagans of ancient Europe, ancient Britain. And you have to have a house of atheists, a seat, a position for people who are not religious at all. And so this system that is currently in place, it's an undemocratic system, because people can say, we're going to vote for this politician during the election because he or she said this is what they're going to pledge and this is what they're going to push to become law, and this is what the people want. So the majority of the people vote for it, this is what they want. But then it goes through the stages of being the first reading of the bill, the second reading, the stage report, the committee report, the committee stage, and the royal assent. And it's going back and forth, having amendments and being discussed and debated, just to get to a House of Lords that's been appointed by a monarch who's not been democratically elected by the people of the nation, or the Commonwealth, you could say, the Commonwealth nations. And the sovereign has the power to appoint a lord who will adhere to their political thinking and their side of the story and their wishes of what they want, and can block a bill that the people of the nations, the civilians of the nation, voted for. So then it's pointless to vote even in a democratic election, in a national election. What's the point if it's just going to be blocked by people who haven't been elected by the people of the nation? That's why Lord Protector, Right Honourable Lord Protector Tony Benn, the late Minister Tony Benn, he called for the House of Lords to be abolished and to be replaced by the House of the People, elected by the people. So you still have the House of Commons, you still have the House of the People, elected by the people, where bills go back and forth and debate and amend, and has stages of reports and committee stages, but it's being assessed by people, or people who have that position of power to assess the bills, who've been democratically elected by the people of the nation. So that's why until the House of Lords is abolished, there's no point voting. And there was something else about the House of Lords. Yeah, the Queen, she has the power to appoint those who have a position in the House of Lords, who are there to observe the law of the House of the Lords. So she can dictate of what goes through and what doesn't go through. And another thing they do, which is illegal, which is undemocratic, is what do they do? Let me just think.